Ocean's Infiltrator. Book 3 in the Siren of Secrets series. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Charlotte from Google. 1. Sirena. Help the humans or let them die. This will not be the first time I choose to be an instrument of death. The acrid scent of guns and explosives, the staccato of weapon fire, and the screech of stress steel as a projectile found its mark. Gun smoke and steam from the ship's boiler engines wreathed the scene like fog from colder climates. I heard Dacia's screams through the murk as she labored to bring forth her child. I shooed the sharks toward the ships, away from my mother, my sister and their patient. I kept to the outer reefs with the other younger girls, fewer in number than they would be in the future. As the ships approached, the other girls fled, tails flicking and fading into deeper, darker water. I did not. My family stayed, so I remained. They did not fear the danger, and I was no less brave than they. Someone had to see to the sharks. I watched a human dive from his vessel. I shaped a wave and sent it racing across the surface to him, pushing him back toward his ship to keep him away from my family. He was a German medical officer from the SS Emden, I learned later. Mother, help me. I am hit. I heard healer Duyong scream. I saw Mother turn to help Duyong. Duty and love warred in her expression, but Mother chose duty as always. She turned away and dragged the human down deep. I watched him die, the boom of guns barely background noise to the sound of my sister screaming then gurgling as she drowned in her own blood, riddled with holes torn by the weapons aboard the human ships. Blood blossomed from Mother's arm, but her call was as strong as the voice she gave to me. No shark approached her as she swam to my sister and her charge, only to find she was too late. Dacia's death was as quick as the shell that took her head. She never felt the shots that killed the child within her. To my shame, I raised my voice to sing to the ships over the firefight on the surface. My anger was so great that I would have killed every human aboard, shattering their skulls with my song, had I known how. All I could do was fill them with a desire to flee at all cost. I felt bitter satisfaction at the captain of the closer ship's response. He ran his vessel aground on the reef, the keel screeching and shattering as the waves ground it flat. Smoke rose from the deck of the Emden, and I remember shaping the waves to skirt the vessel, letting the fire burn without cease. The second ship's captain found a different focus for his siren-induced recklessness. He'd spotted another ship and moved out of range of Mother to attack more humans instead. His Sydney fired on the Burresque. Those on board the Burresque scuttled their vessel, opening up the seacocks, before they took to the boats. Coal dust spread like a dark cloud of corruption beneath the surface as the Burresque descended to the seafloor. I turned my eyes from the carnage to assist my mother in healing my sister, but we were too late to do anything for Duyong. Once more, Mother dived into the depths, dragging two bleeding bodies with her. The other girls on shark patrol had long since headed home, and I was alone. Heartsick, I headed for the beach. Lit by the fires aboard the vessel I'd wrecked, I shifted to human form and let tears flow as I sobbed on the sand. No 8-year-old child should witness the death of her own sister. When Mother returned to find me, her face was grave. The council will believe that the humans caused this disaster on their own and that you fled as the other younger girls did. No child in living memory could sink a ship with just her voice, and no lone adult could sink two. You are young to possess such power, yet it will grow greater still as you do. You are my heir now, child. You must do your duty young, for I am not. My mouth opened to sob her name, but I swallowed and stood to address her with the respect that was her due. Yes, Elder Saphira. I will do as the council commands me. She looked approvingly at the semi-sunken ship. You must learn to lead, for you have the power within you to take my place in the council. But you must learn to control it. My anger burned more fiercely than the ship. I wiped my tears away. Will I get to kill more humans? I tried to control my voice, but it wavered as I thought of my sister. I'd looked up to Duyong so much, and her death tore holes in my heart, as if the shells had shredded my body and not hers. Mother smiled. First you must learn to enslave one, so that he cannot resist you. Duty first, then pleasure. 2. Sirena. Mother was mistaken, I know now. There is always duty, but occasionally pleasure is a part of it. Like now. I tried to focus purely on the speed, the feeling of air rushing past me as the metal beast between my legs roared his defiance at the road. There were few others around at this early hour, and I pushed him harder than I should have. It was not enough. I felt tears on my face once more at my memories, for my pain dwelt deep. I had not thought of Duyong or Mother for many years, though Mother had survived her oldest child and trained one of mine to take Duyong's place as healer. No longer a scared child, as Elder Sirena, I had claimed my place on the council many years ago now, and I suspected none were as skilled in seduction or song as I. Not a single one of my students showed the promise I had, but perhaps they lacked the inspiration. A man who would love a dragon indeed. I felt the smile lift my lips as I turned my thoughts to the council as it was under my mother's guidance, and that of her mother before her. She had visited the Atlantic with grandmother as ambassador in the past. For a moment, I wished I could follow my mother and grandmother to see the only city of our kind. Mother. Movement caught my eye on the street ahead, and I reluctantly slowed. Without my sharp eyes, someone might have been hurt. Like my second daughter's father, killed on a wet road whilst riding his old Triumph, with his wife riding pillion behind him. What a waste! It takes a special kind of man to love a dragon. I sat patiently waiting for the mother duck to cross the road with her ducklings, from the river to the pond in the park on the other side. She looked at me for a moment, and I gave her a nod of acknowledgement. She knows what I am. A water dragon on a hog in the pre-dawn light, remembering my own chicks at home. I sighed, missing all three of them, though none were as fluffy and innocent as the ducklings before me. No, on land I am Vanessa, just another human. I must remember that as the ocean's infiltrator, I am not a dragon or a fish or any other creature, I must think like a human. Beneath my riding leathers, I concentrated on keeping my skin the same color as any other human woman. Oops, I forgot underwear again. I must remember it next time. It causes so much trouble sometimes when I forget. For a moment I thought of a time when I had not known about underwear to don beneath my leather clothing. My dragon skin, he'd called it, as he unbuttoned my jacket and slid it off my shoulders to reveal the pale human skin he'd loved. My bike snarled beneath me, a sweet sound that I'd missed, so I guided him home. I reluctantly covered Harley up with his dust sheet in the garage, my riding helmet tucked into the lockbox at the back. I'd considered selling him, as he wouldn't fit with the image I needed to provide in the near future, but sentimentality won out. He reminded me of a certain Scottish engineer who'd had a liking for leather. The man was long dead now, though his legacy lived on. It seemed my life was full of such memories, the highlights that I would never forget, amid the farewells that were left unsaid. I turned out the light in the garage and trudged to the basement, my fair hair fluttering like frayed rope in the light breeze off the river. Stiff locks clicked as I turned keys, stepping into the secure storage room, protecting my possessions from prying eyes. The space was filled with furniture. I would need to shift it to the house before I left tomorrow evening. For now, I had a moment to indulge myself. I knew the bookcases by sight and touch, though it was too dark to discern the words. The books I looked for were as familiar to my fingers as my own skin, for I had caressed the covers many times. They held the history of me and mine. Beneath the books are. I dropped to my knees, opening the drawer at the base of the bookcase to pull out the rolled pages my mother had drawn at the end of her life, the colors still bright. Crossing the room to the light switch, I reflected that I would need more light to see this in the detail I wanted. The light flared briefly, before emitting a sound like an egg cracked on the side of a glass bowl and returning me to darkness. "Useless human technology," I said aloud as I started up the stairs to where the sunlight streamed in, sitting on the steps with my pages. I made a mental note to have more than one light installed in the basement. Perhaps I would have those little LED downlights that sparkled so in the lighting shops on Leach Highway. I unrolled the crackling paper against the bare white wall beside me, thinking of the envoys I must send on my return. The first was a map, originally drawn by humans, but marked by Saphira's hand in ink. The city's location, the location of other points she knew and visited, each represented by unlabeled ink dots in the flat blue of the Atlantic Ocean. My chosen envoys faced a long swim. The second was her drawing of what the city of Atlantis used to look like, when it was on the surface. When our kind were known to humans. My people taught the Greeks to build as they had, as well as how to rule with a whole people. They had corrupted our governing system as only humans can, but the buildings had not been as poorly constructed as their democracy. Our city had been beautiful, built over and around water, a coral atoll that had sprouted pastel marble which reflected sun and water to perfection. I touched the picture with its vivid colors. Mother had even drawn in the light in the sky, the glow of the volcano that sent a tsunami over my people's home when only we had survived. What would it have felt like to swim in tsunami waves? The power of it aroused me more than was wise, alone as I was. I took a deep breath to steady myself. I shifted the colored page and set it beside the black and white sketch beneath it. Ah, the contrast between the city my people built and the ruin it had become, before I drew my first breath. I toyed with the thought of going in the envoy's stead, but my duty lay here, in my human house in a human city. As I had discussed with Dharma, our envoys should be led by Cantrella, for she shared the philosophy of our Atlantic sisters far more than our own. I drank in the colors, wondering whether Cantrella would be willing to come on land and draw what she had seen for me. I doubted it. Perhaps I should purchase one of the underwater cameras the humans had and ask her to take that instead. I could put digital photographs on my laptop computer, which I would need to replace with the latest model once more. I lifted my hands, letting the papers crackle and roll up. Practical matters drew my attention more than my memories of the past. I had important decisions to make. To help the humans or stand by and let them die. 3. Joe. Whoever wired up these places either had a death wish or he was fucking high at the time, I muttered as I found yet another nest of tangled wires under the tin roof. They'd pretty much corroded together. Any insulation on them had disintegrated about the time I was born, I decided. I ripped the mess out and dropped it on the concrete below. No one in their right mind would have volunteered for this, but I figured I was probably a bit mad in my reasons for it too. Skipper and I had come to a business arrangement. We were going to be partners in a sort of holiday resort during the warmer months at the Abrolhos, to run in between fishing. He'd been sweet-talking all his fishing mates who didn't fish anymore to hand over their asbestos shacks to him, so they didn't have to pay a shitload of money to pull them down. I'd been doing a bit of persuasion of my own, calling in every tradie I knew who'd do cash jobs and owed me a favor. When they hesitated, I promised I'd take them fishing when the job was done. Worked like a charm. Somehow, we'd ended up with about a dozen falling down fishing shacks on Rat Island, and now I was holding up my end of the deal, arranging to get guys out to do the work on them so the shitholes could become deluxe holiday villas or something like that. I didn't know Skipper's daughter, the travel agent, was writing the press for it. Now if I could just get power restored to these stupid sheds, we could get the asbestos guys in on their next week off to do some serious renovations. I had the replacement sheeting waiting in a sea container at the harbor, ready to winch aboard the Dolphin for the return trip, after the first load of asbestos landed in Geraldton for safe disposal. The sooner the asbestos was gone, the better. I yanked on another stubborn strand of wire and it came slithering across the roof, guarded by a huge spider. I thought the orb spiders were big the first year I was out here, but she was almost as big as my hand. I knew from experience that she wasn't dangerous. I liked the way she and her mates kept the flies and mosquitoes down, so I brushed her off the corroded wiring and dropped it over the eaves. I figured I'd get this place done before dark and then I'd be finished, a day earlier than expected. Maybe I could spend tomorrow fishing and take some nice fillets home with me. I knew the good fishing spots around Rat now, because I had to know where to take the guys on their fishing trips. I knew the spots that were pretty and not good for fishing too though, so we could keep the tourists occupied in trying. Couldn't have them catching their bag limit too quickly, they'd get bored and complain. I climbed down off the roof and hooked up the outdoor power point on the corner of the house, on one of the frame beams. I plugged in my light and switched the power point on. Brilliant, I thought as the globe gave a blinding flash of white before I turned it off again. I packed everything back in my tool bag and started collecting up the mess of corroded wiring. I dropped the whole lot on my veranda and went into my shack for a beer, a bite to eat and some sleep. I'd need to be up early for the best fish. 4. Sirena. I dusted my hands off. I'd finished pushing all the furniture into place. I clicked a pen, writing a list of what I still needed to purchase and arrange for a life on land. A new vehicle. Clothing and amusements for a child. A new computer. Waterproof camera. Alcohol. I looked down at my list and added another item. Light bulbs. Perishable food would wait until my return, for the journey to my home and then back to my land house was not a short one. I dug out sufficient cash from storage and thought of taking Harley for one more ride before I slid beneath the sea surface in the dark of night. The engine's vibrations between my leather-clad thighs were irresistible. How can any man compare to the power of this? I thought as I roared to the car dealership to purchase something ladylike, shiny and blue. When the day ended, my new little Mazda sat in the garage, her engine still warm. My sweet Harley was hidden behind the Holden, in the deep darkness at the top of the garage. I'd given him a little service before I'd covered him, lovingly cranking the spanner to make sure he was as tight as I wanted him to be. I felt a wrench that I could not ride him in my role as a responsible human suburban single mother. I'd already replaced the Edison light globe in the basement, watching it glow in satisfaction before I switched it off. I would call an electrician to add more lighting on my return. All my new stainless steel appliances were packed into the cupboard beneath the silver hot plate, from the mixer to the pizza cooker. I even had a curved pizza knife tucked into the third drawer. I sat in the kitchen and opened a chilled Stella. I raised it above my head. In memory of death and duty, I said quietly, sipping the beer with my eyes closed as my thoughts turned to more recent memories. Should I pick up my smartphone and call Skipper, to obtain the contact details of his sexy deckhand with the sweet ass? I shook my head with a smile. Not tonight. Perhaps one day. I drained my drink and threw the empty into my new recycling bin. I looked out the window at the new playground and swing set, hoping they would meet with my youngest daughter's approval when I brought her to land. We would have to drive by a playground full of human children so she would understand its use. Marina, just the thought of my youngest daughter had me yearning for home. I slipped out of my clothes, throwing them into the hamper beside the new washing machine. I padded across the dining room, snatching up the digital camera on my way to the folding doors that led outside. I closed and locked them behind me, hiding the key behind the mermaid tile on the wall. I strode across the street and the park to the river in the darkness. I slipped over the side of the ferry terminal jetty, and into the dark river water. On my return, I will truly infiltrate the humans as never before, with my daughter by my side. May heaven help them if I decide that I will not, I thought as I swam out to sea. Next landfall is at the Abrolhos, for a slight rest before I head home. If only it were the fishing season, when Skipper's dreamy deckhand might appear on my decking again. Perhaps there is one man who can rival my Harley. I let my laughter bubble up to the surface as I swept through the water, increasing my speed. 5. Joe. Vanessa. I stepped off the shack's veranda and there she was, like a perfect hallucination. She sat on a chair in the sun, sipping from a steaming cup. More than 3 years had passed, but she hadn't changed a bit. I kept my eyes on her as I stumbled closer, scared that I was dreaming and she'd disappear. She jumped to her feet in surprise. Joe. What are you doing here? Her hands and the cup they held started to shake. The fishing season's over. I didn't think anyone was here. I smiled. Maintenance goes on year-round, fishing season or not. Anyway, all that's changed. Fishing is year-round now too, and we might be allowed to take tourists. Skipper and I have a business plan, buying up some of the old fishing shacks from guys who don't fish anymore. I'm here trying to fix them up so they'll have power. Then we can renovate them properly so they look nicer. I frowned. I didn't hear a plane land. I looked at the jetty. And you didn't bring the Siren over? When did you arrive? Her eyes widened in alarm. The cup dropped from her hands and smashed at her feet, but she didn't even glance at it. Early this morning. You mustn't have heard the plane, you were probably still asleep. She looked away as her voice faded. Shit. She didn't take a plane or a boat. She probably swam here while it was still dark. I couldn't keep my eyes off her, drinking her in. In 3.5 years I'd thought of a million questions to ask her, and now she was in front of me. I was tongue-tied. I'd felt like the world was in black and white, and it suddenly burst into color now I saw her again. I didn't care what she was, I just wanted to hold her again and never let go. Preferably with as little clothing on as possible. She backed away from me. I just came to pick a few things up and then I'll go again. I'm not going to be here long. I should never have come. She fumbled for the door handle behind her, not taking her frightened eyes off me. As if she was afraid of me. I found my voice. Please don't go. I sounded desperate. She dropped her hands to her sides, her back to the door. Her smile was wan. I have to, she whispered. You don't, I told her, grasping her nerveless hands. Please stay with me. I can take care of you. I'll never look at another woman again. I'll do anything to make you happy. You barely know me, she said. I know you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met. I've loved you since the moment I first saw you. You're amazing. You're an expert fisher, you're so smart I can barely follow you sometimes, you kill sharks with a filleting knife, you're incredible in bed and you're a good cook. Your smile and your laugh are like sunshine. I haven't stopped thinking about you since I met you, and I don't want to be without you. I took a deep breath. And your tail is exactly the same color as your eyes, the most beautiful stormy blue I've ever seen. She tried to pull her hands away from me, but I held on. What did you say? She asked faintly. I don't care what you are. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, from top to beautiful blue tail. I love you and I want to stay with you for the rest of my life. I kissed her. She froze for a moment before she responded to my kiss, as half-hearted and cold as a dying fish. You must be joking, she managed to say when I broke away from her. I shook my head, my eyes on hers. How long have you known? She said weakly, sliding down the door to sink onto the veranda decking. I sat on the decking in front of her and pulled out my phone. Since just after you left. I saw you say goodbye to the island before you swam away with the other two. I started flipping feverishly through the menus on my phone, searching for the video, my only evidence that I hadn't dreamed her. There. I showed her the grainy video, watching her rise from water, say her goodbye and flip her tail as she swam away. It might have been the millionth time I'd watched it, but a black hole opened up in my heart all the same. A tear trickled down her cheek. "How many people have you shown this to?" she asked urgently as she wiped it away. I hesitated. "Just one. Dean saw it before I did." But he didn't believe it was real. He thought it was just a movie. She managed a weak laugh. "You've had evidence of the existence of my people for 3 years and you haven't shown it to anyone?" "I didn't want anyone else to see it," I replied defensively. "You weren't wearing any clothes and it didn't seem right." Her laughter was stronger. "You could have posted that video on the internet and had humans hunting for us for 3 years, but you didn't do it. Not because you didn't want people to know what I was, but because you didn't want them to see my breasts." For the first time she laughed like I remembered. Then she sobered a little. "Did you make any copies of that?" "No," I answered immediately. "I haven't replaced my phone for 3 years because it has that video on it. I didn't want to share you with anyone." She closed her eyes. "So if I destroy that video, the only human who knows will be you." She looked as if the knowledge pained her. I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. "But that's the only thing I have of you. The only memory you left me." She stared at me in disbelief. "I gave you plenty of pleasant memories, including a parting one that I know you enjoyed. Your electronic memory puts my people in danger." I struggled to explain. "In 3 years even my best memories fade. A video, or even a picture, helps me to remember." She held my phone in her hands and frowned at the screen. I reached for it, but she scrambled to her feet and ran out onto the path. "There, deleted," she said in relief before I'd made it down the steps off her veranda. Before I could reach her, she threw my phone out across the anchorage. It smashed against a jetty pylon before it fell into the water in pieces. "No," I gasped. She held her hands up in a gesture of conciliation. "I will reimburse you for the loss of your phone. It was necessary." She looked at me in concern. "Now, what do I do with you?" Vanessa just stole, smashed and sank my phone. I felt lightheaded. "Marry me," I told her with a laugh that sounded slightly hysterical. She shook her head. "Don't be silly. I'll be gone as soon as it's dark." "Then spend the day with me. Please," I begged. "Give me a memory to replace the one you just took." She bit her lip. "What did you have in mind?" I could think of a million things to do, and they all involved taking her clothes off. I voiced the most improbable of the lot. "I'd like to go for a swim with you. I'd like you to show me what you really look like in daylight. I want to know what it feels like to touch your tail." She opened her mouth but couldn't seem to frame the words. "There's no one else here, just us. No one will see you but me," I promised. She looked at me for a long moment, before she smiled sadly. "I'll stay with you just for a swim." 6. Laila. 100 years ago, the humans were at war with one another. They ventured to sea in vessels which attempted to sink the others. Many vessels were sunk in our ocean, but there is one which stands out. A battle occurred near the nursery grounds. A vessel was damaged and many humans were hurt or killed. 3 of our kind remained at the nursery grounds. Darchia was a mother who was due to birth a child. She was laboring as the vessel appeared and the healers could not move her. A human from the stricken vessel saw our kind and approached the shore. He was a human healer and he thought to assist. Healer Duyong stayed with Darchia, whilst Healer Saphira took hold of the human healer and swam him into deep water, amid metal projectiles fired by the human vessels at one another. She held him there until his breath ran out, but sustained an injury from a piece of metal through her arm. When she returned to Healer Duyong and Darchia, she found that metal projectiles had pierced their bodies also. Both they and the unborn child were lifeless. Saphira carried her own daughter and Darchia to deep water, to hide their bodies from the humans. Though injured, she swam home to tell the other elders of the tragedy. Today we have her story to remind us of the dangers of humans, whether they are hostile or well-meaning, and the sacrifices that must be made to ensure our safety. Teacher Dharma spoke further of security and the need for our people to remain hidden from humans, but I turned to Estella to converse quietly. Could you do it, Estella? Kill a human in cold blood, to protect our people? Her reply was thoughtful. I would not like to. I would hope to blend with humans well enough that death would not be necessary. And you? I did not hesitate. My people are here. Humans hurt my mother when she was among them. I could hurt or kill a human to protect myself or my people. How would you do it, Laila? If a human saw you swimming, how could you kill him? Estella's big dark eyes were sad. I closed my eyes and imagined my actions. I might try to lure him into the water for a swim with me, then drown him or call sharks to him if it were at night. If he were aboard a vessel, I would shape waves to capsize the vessel and then ensure the human did not survive the wreck. Estella shook her head, those big eyes wide. I could not swim so close with a human, to pull him down into the depths and drown him. To see the human's face as his air runs out, and he realizes that you are the instrument of his death. I might be able to shape waves, sink ships or call sharks, but to kill a human with my hands on him? It seems too personal. After all, humans are people too. But Estella and Laila, this is what you must do. Teacher Dharma's interruption surprised us both. It does not matter if the human is unknown to you or if you have joined with him and been as close to the human as our kind can be. We must protect our people from humans at all costs. If the humans catch even one of us, it is death to her and all of our people, for they will hunt us. It is better to die whilst destroying a human witness than to be caught and killed by humans. Estella turned to Teacher Dharma. It seems so drastic, teacher. How often have our kind been called to give their life to kill a human in order to protect our people? Teacher Dharma frowned. Not in my lifetime, but in legends there are stories of sisters who gave their lives to end humans who knew too much. You must be prepared to act to protect your people, if you are to be permitted on land. That is one reason why we avoid close contact with humans as much as possible. Even Elder Sirena, who has been closest to the humans in her role as human liaison, will not hesitate if a human sees too much. She would take his life and sacrifice her own if necessary, for she is well aware that more than 2 lives are at stake.